Hello everybody and welcome back to Across the Line. Welcome to our race review for the 2024 Japanese Grand Prix. It was 6 o'clock we woke up this morning to watch this. Zach, how did you find it? Was it a good race? I ask this every time.
I think it was one of the more boring ones, if I'm being honest. And I don't know that some of that was waking up at 6 and therefore you want more. But beyond like the early crash, not a lot happened.
No. I would have preferred the red flag to have happened later on in the race, if I'm being honest. It happened way too early because I woke up, saw Sector 1, and then I was like, all right, I got to wait 15 minutes now for the race to start again. It's, red flag early on. Not unusual for Suzuka. He usually throws up some drama. But, it wasn't too bad in terms of a race. I think it was better than last weekend. We saw more on-track action. I don't know if you'd agree with that.
Yeah, there was a few battles and overtakes, but again, I just don't feel like my heart was in it. I just felt like as soon as we saw Max kind of going down the road again, and yet I know we predicted that after Australia, he's just gonna go. But it was another 1-2 victory for Red Bull. Yeah, I was just hoping for a bit more. Even at a certain stage, Lando was running up there.
Yeah.
There was a few interesting strategies, but overall, I was hoping for more.
No, same here. So we're going to change up the podcast format just a little bit today. We're not going to drag on and spend time talking about every single team in particular. We've just separated the race highlights and the low points, and then we're going to do a brief rundown of the standing. So it's sort of similar to what we used to do, just a bit more condensed. And we're going to see if this format works for you guys as well as us too. So with that being said, let's start off with the race highlights. There were plenty of highlights throughout the race, in my opinion. And I've written down first, George and Oscar having a good little ding-dong at the end to, the last few laps. I thought that was quite nice to see. Some actual racing with these regs that I don't think have been so good.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed when it was kind of predicted a couple laps earlier exactly what Fernando Alonso was going to do in backing Oscar into George.
Yeah.
And it almost was beneficial for the two of them had it not been for Oscar's little mistake. But
no.
George capitalized, and 7th is a good result for Mercedes now.
It's so weird how far this team has sort of fallen from its, pedestal. The grace period that we had of Mercedes dominance seems so far away. And for this team now to be celebrating P7 is just really weird to me. I don't know about you. Piastri, good defense. Good weekend for McLaren, I'd argue. Solid qualifying. Lando could have got a podium potentially.
Could have got a podium, but I think I listened to their interviews afterwards, and both Lando and Oscar harped on about how they're still a distance off Ferrari.
Right, okay.
And because it was put to them by the interviewer that, this is quite a battle for second place, and both Lando and Oscar shut that down very quickly and said that Ferrari are ahead of them, and they need to bring upgrades if they are going to catch them.
Yeah, there were a few upgrades brought this weekend. I don't think there was anything too major to any other team
for McLaren.
Red Bull, who brought slimmer side pods. Not the no pods that we were rumoured or told about that they may have had, but no. There's very little in terms of upgrades that we've seen yet. I'm looking forwards to when we start getting into that season where, McLaren last year had that huge jump in around Austria and Silverstone. They had that huge leap of performance, and I want to see that for, Aston Martin or McLaren again, just someone getting right up there with the Red Bulls. But at the moment, no one seems that they can really compete with them.
I know you said good day for McLaren. I actually think they'd have almost been hoping for a little bit more. It was a good quality performance for them. Good at Suzuka last year. They either needed another safety car to just kind of destroy Charles's strategy a little bit. I think everyone expected that wouldn't have been the end of the accidents on lap 1. I was devastated to find out how hot the weather was this morning.
Yes,
and that there was no chance of rain.
No, that was pretty poor, because we did in our predictions video, we mentioned how the weather forecast was going to be wet, and it was on the Friday. Practice 2, barely anyone went out. So that sort of gave me some faith or some hope that we were going to have some weather over the weekend that could have interrupted the racing. But no, it was what was the words that Crofty said this morning? It's the hottest day of the year in Japan. It's the driest track we've ever seen, something like that.
We need a wet race this year. We need a wet race soon.
Well, we've got
It rains
China.
in China. It's
been a while since we've raced at China, so yeah, maybe. I think Imola maybe could be one of our first wet races. Usually Imola is, last year it was flooded, it was that wet. It was probably quicker to go around the track on a boat last year, but I want wet weather. We all do, I think, at this point. Just something to spice it up a little bit, because there's always a bit of jeopardy then, isn't it, when the weather's less predictable. It's
becoming a little bit stale. Like, we had a year of it, and I think that now the fatigue has really set in with, Max is down the road. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of British fans that woke up this morning to watch the race didn't finish it.
It's something that I think is a giant podcast topic, video topic in of itself, and that's Max's dominance isn't necessarily the issue in the sense that we've seen dominance in this sport before. You know, it'd be hypocritical of us to say that it wasn't somewhat boring during the Lewis period and the Vettel period and the Schumacher one before that. But no one can get close to them at all. It's not even as if
so far
there is much action elsewhere on track. I remember the Hamilton era being somewhat predictable with Lewis winning quite a lot, but he didn't win all the time. Max, all right, granted he didn't win the last race, but he's won the last 9 before that, and then before that he won like 11 or 12 in a row.
He basically has to not finish a race in order for someone else to win.
Yeah,
something has to go wrong with the car.
It's that car and him as a driver are a really good combo, and that is no fault of himself that he is dominating. It's just the fact that other teams haven't been able to catch up, and I don't think these regs have fully worked out as they were originally intended to. 2022, I'd argue, was a fairly decent season. You know, we had
Charles,
a potential title battle with Charles and that of Max, but then there were slight changes with floor heights and such because of the porpoising from the Mercedes. They retaliated and stuff was changed. I don't know. I don't think these regs have been that successful. Maybe that's a conversation for another video.
Maybe I'm just jaded because I woke up at 6 a.m. on a Sunday.
That, and you're also ill.
And I am ill. But I just say, it's no fault of Max. Max is a phenomenal driver, and he's driving so well. It's just... And honestly, it's not even about Max winning. It's about the margin by which Max is winning. That, you know, as soon as he's gone, that's it. It's gone.
No one can catch him.
And he's just going to keep building on that. No race should be finishing consistently with the winner 10 seconds ahead. Minimum 10 seconds ahead.
He's won the last Japanese Grand Prix for the last 3 years. And I know there's the statistic of whoever usually gets pole around the track ends up going on to win. But I just think in a sport where you've got these such amazing pieces of machinery, these cars are amazing, they're meant to be the best of the best, there should be more racing with these vehicles. And I really think it's worth us possibly talking about that in another video of ways to combat the racing, because I think there's been rumours of the rule change in 2026 having pushed a pass very similar to that of IndyCar, which I would quite like to see. I want something to sort of, I don't know, not artificially make the racing better, but just, I want more competition.
Yeah, and it's a sport of such fine margins, and you hear it all the time. It's like, oh, this is worth 0.2 a lap, sort of thing. Yeah. They're trying to scrape out microseconds out of performance, and then at the end of the race, the team that's won it is seconds, full 10, 15 seconds ahead of second place, whilst everyone else is trying to scrape microseconds. It shouldn't be happening.
No.
It's so far, that margin is so far, and 10 seconds in any other aspect of life does not sound like a long time. 10 seconds in a race is massive.
Huge. Yeah, so that's an entirely different conversation for us to, a rabbit hole for us to dive down. But coming back to the race that we had today, there was thankfully some positives that we can talk about before we get all negative again about these regs. Ferrari, I think, had a really good weekend. Specifically, well, I can't even say specifically Carlos. He started P4, finished P3. Charles, Ferrari did good. Strategy was good. There was no blunders, no mechanical issues. He started P8, he finished P4. It was a really good day for that Ferrari.
Great drive to do a one-stop.
Yeah.
From so early on.
A strategy in which Mercedes fumbled. They couldn't do it. I don't know if it's more to do with the car, because last week I think I mentioned how Ferrari have gotten on top of the tyre problems that they used to have. They were really good today. Tyre-wise, especially Charles.
It was a great drive by Charles, and I know there was a point in that race where he was actually up there. It would have been a near impossibility to do a one-stop and get a podium.
Yeah. It's nice to see that this new Ferrari era with Fred at the helm seems to be, from the outside, working better than that with Mr. Matti Binotto. No, it's really rewarding, I think, for them to see this progress being made. But it does beg the question, why the hell has no one picked up Carlos yet?
I think it was said in commentary today that Carlos had apparently commented on this and saying that he wants to get it sorted sooner rather than later.
Oh, 100%. Of course he would.
I think it's more on the teams. I think that there's been suggestion of Red Bull, but it's too early for them to fire a shot like that. They'd have to go later in the season if they were to take a Carlos Sainz over a Perez. Right now, the only real open seat is the Mercedes. And I think that one needs to be filled either by Carlos or by someone else to sort of start off that domino effect.
It was something that Alonso was questioned about today, and that was regarding, had he been offered the seat at Mercedes, has there been conversation or talks? And he sort of shut it down quite quickly, saying, like, they're behind us at the moment. Why would I really want to go for that seat?
Yeah.
Which is bananas when you think about it. That, you know, this is Mercedes. This is a team that won 8 Constructors' Championships on the bounce. Why are people not going for this seat? You'd be biting off people's hands, I imagine, for a Mercedes seat. But now, I think Carlos wants that Red Bull seat. He knows that's the best car, and that Perez's seat is, I don't know if it's in jeopardy. He had a bit of a stinker in Australia. He had a very solid performance this weekend. I think he justified his seat this weekend. So that makes it more difficult for Carlos.
I think that the thing with the Red Bull option is, do Red Bull, obviously Carlos is a phenomenal driver. Do they want a Carlos, or do they want a Bottas to a Hamilton?
Yeah.
Do they want someone who's going to score points but not upset the balance with Max? Because Carlos, I think in that Red Bull would challenge Max, not to the same, like, I don't think consistently, but I think he'd put it closer in a second place with the occasional race win, which I don't think Perez is capable of. Yeah, anything would be a step down, because Ferrari are comfortably, I think, the second best team right now.
Yeah, exactly. So why would he go for less? Like, why would he want to go to Sauber that's going to become Audi? Why would he want to be in a back marker team? Like, that's not what I'd want if I was in a second best car.
And there's a lot of hope on Audi, and we honestly don't know what they're even going to look like when they do come into the sport.
We have no idea. They're making an engine. We don't know if that's going to be any good or not. There's going to be new cars. You don't know how those regs are going to work. It's so many unknown variables. Unless he has seen what they are making, like how Lewis saw what Mercedes was doing, then it seems like a bit of a gamble. This story's going to develop. We're going to find out more over the coming weeks. And a final good point I'd like to add for today's race, something that you mentioned earlier on today, Yuki Tsunoda, the Japanese driver, scoring points at his home Grand Prix. The first time in 12 years that I believe a Japanese driver has scored points in Japan in F1. So it was a nice little statistic. I'm very happy for him.
Yeah, I thought, and it's back-to-back point scoring as well.
Yeah,
for Yuki,
7
which
points.
Is good for them as a team, good for Yuki as a driver, bad for Daniel.
We'll get onto that.
But no, Yuki elated when he got out of the car at the end. He celebrated that point like he just won the race. But no, fantastic. I think Yuki is doing what he needs to do this year. I know it's only a point today, but
he's driving great.
He's scoring points in a car that maybe at the start of the year we had a lot more optimism for, but upon seeing it, I think that it's sort of on that cusp of, is it in the top five? Is it in the bottom five? It's probably in the bottom five,
Yeah.
like constructors teams. So for Yuki to be scoring points with it, yeah, brilliant. He's having a good year.
Speaking of the RB, actually, with Tsunoda, let's jump on to the negatives of the Grand Prix today, and we'll talk about Daniel, the other driver of the Visa Cash App RB. What happened? He was in the wall.
I don't think it's Daniel's fault. I think this one was a racing incident. It was hard to tell at the time whether it was. At first, I thought it looked like it was Albon's fault, but then upon watching it back, you go, I don't think either of them were really at fault. It was just kind of a squeeze. Didn't have anywhere to go. It looked bad immediately, so it was good to see them both out of the car very early on. Where we had touched on, if Yuki scores points and Daniel doesn't, it's going to pile pressure on Daniel. I don't think as much. I think this will put less pressure on Daniel than if Yuki had done what he did today and Daniel finished 14th.
Yes, I completely agree. You can see in the cockpit cam, Daniel looks to his left to cover off. I can't remember what car it is. There's a car to his left. He goes to the right to give him some space, unaware of Albon being at his back right, clipped the back rear wheel, and just spun off into the gravel trap and into the wall. So, no, I agree. I think it was a racing incident. Had it been slam dunk penalty for Ricciardo, that I don't think would have boded well. But because it was more of a racing incident, lap one drama, it didn't look too
happens.
bad. Yeah, exactly.
It happens.
Regarding the Williams, though, of Albon, they are struggling with parts. I read a statistic on Twitter that they've spent upwards of around 2 million so far on damage repairs. And in this cost cap era, that is a huge chunk of money that they can no longer use. This is going to be a tricky first leg of the season for Williams.
It's a team that can't really afford it either.
No. Especially when we thought they were on the upwards as well.
Yeah, they might still be. It's just hard to tell. They need to be finishing races. They need to have two cars at the finish line. I think it's hard to judge at times how that Williams is, because the only car that actually did get to the end today and not without trouble, it was Logan.
Ended up in the wall lap 41, 42.
Albon is obviously a better driver to gauge what that car can do, but it does feel like it's going to struggle to score points this year. I thought it'd sort of be the best of the bottom bunch.
Yeah, likewise. I thought they were on a good trajectory at the end of last year. I thought they were going to score points by now, but no. It just goes back to what we've said. Great. Like the top field, the top 5 teams are so competitive. The bottom 5 are really struggling. And for Stroll, who is in the Aston, which we would usually say would be in the points, to not be there, that left the gap for Yuki to score that extra point today. You know, had it not been for Stroll, none of them would have scored points. That, you know, those back marker teams as such. Another team that was struggling as well, Mercedes. They didn't have the best weekend. They didn't have the worst weekend. Toto Wolff came out and said on social media, on the Mercedes socials, that they didn't think it was a bad weekend. They actually seen it as a good weekend because they got a lot of data. But it's like, you just finished P7 and P9.
Yeah, Lewis wasn't happy on team radio with the strategy. I don't think George was happy with the strategy.
No.
Both had their little nibbles over team radio just about the car and the pace. Yeah. Every time someone goes past Lewis, I can't remember if he did it this week, but every time someone goes past Lewis, he says, "Wow, that car is fast." He's just thinking forward at the moment. I almost feel like midway through this season,
he's clocked out.
Lewis just checks out. Yeah,
it's so weird how they almost did the same strategy of that of Ferrari with the one stop, just didn't work as well. Whether the car was harder on its tyres than that of the Ferrari, they had less pace. It looked slow around the fast high-speed corners. Yeah, just a stinker weekend for them, in my opinion. This is a team that should be scoring wins and podiums. They should be up there.
I know one thing we have touched on is that Carlos is, at least at the start of the season, outperforming Charles. George beating Lewis again.
Yeah.
Do you think Ferrari are having some regrets?
I don't think so. I imagine Mercedes will be putting George before Lewis going forwards with all these strategies. openly announced that he's leaving the team end of this year. Mercedes will have to have meetings regarding development of this car that Lewis probably won't be a part of going forwards, because he could just go to Ferrari next year with, oh, well, we did this. He outqualified him yesterday for the first time this season. And today his race pace wasn't great. Lewis openly said, like, do you want me to let George pass? Playing like a very good teammate game. I'm pretty sure Nico Rosberg was throwing up a clutch somewhere hearing that radio message. Yeah, I'm not counting the chickens until the eggs have hatched. I don't think Russell is the GOAT just yet.
Master of 7th place.
He is. He really is. And then finally, before we finish off our low points of the Grand Prix, we got to cover two teams that we've barely touched upon because they were nowhere really to be seen. Our favourite teams, Kick Sauber and the almighty Alpine. Nowhere. Again. Bottas did have a good start. I think I saw him get up to P12 and then he had to pit. And it all went.
Yeah,
Pete
they had a
Tom
good
from there.
8-second pit stop this weekend.
8 seconds, very good, very good. Yeah, they didn't seem to have too much pace. They looked pretty good actually on the softs, I should say that, and then it sort of dropped off later on throughout the race. Alpine, they just went backwards. Ocon tried to start a French Revolution, Civil War at some point by Gasly. Did Gasly hit him? Or did Ocon hit him?
Gasly
Yeah.
into Ocon.
Gasly into Ocon, trying to start some sort of French drama. Yeah, terrible weekend for both teams. Nothing much really more to say on those. I don't know if you've got anything else to say.
No, I'm actually just trying to go, and I know some of my brain right now is not fully functioning, but I'm trying to go back through the race in my memory and go, I have nothing on Alpine. I can't recall
I just remember
other than that little incident with the two of them together.
They were constantly overtaken in turn one. That's all I remember. Slow on the straights, always overtaken in turn one. Will it turn round? They've said this week that it's going to take them months before they can start to see any progress. And at that point, all the other teams will have developed as well. So
I never trust when they say things like that. I just never trust it. It's just like, oh yeah, no, we're so far behind, and then they just something. I never trust when they say things like that. So I actually said to you just before this call, I actually think Alpine will score points this season. I don't know. I just think at a certain point they will bring some upgrades. They'll get it right. They'll correct it. This is a car that a few years ago was up there, and it's two great drivers. And they've got such a good driver pairing. I think that they'll score points. I think they'll get it right at a certain point, and they are two drivers that can capitalize, and are two drivers that have proven that they can capitalize in cars that probably aren't quite there.
Yeah,
at other teams, and they've scored points before. So
yeah. So that's pretty much our low points. High points we've all discussed. So we're going to do a quick race rundown now of the constructors. We're not going to go into as much depth as we usually do, just to see how this plays out. So kicking things off with where we just finished our last sort of piece. 10th place, Alpine, 0 points. Crap. Absolute pants.
And that's that.
9th place, we've got Kick Sauber with 0 points still. I think they had a better weekend this weekend. I think it was a better weekend.
8-second pit stop. If that's all that it was, they got one retirement.
Yeah, one retirement with Joe.
Only one retirement.
And an 8-second pit stop.
And an 8-second pit stop. They're coming up good.
You never know. Next weekend in China, they might get 6 seconds. Or maybe I'm jumping the gun. 7 seconds.
Both cars finish.
Who knows?
Yeah.
That'd be a big weekend for them. They'll drive around the parade lap. Well, it's Joe, home Grand Prix.
Oh, yeah.
He's going to celebrate like he's won the World Championship. 7th place? No, 8th place. 8th place. Williams, 0 points. Only one car finished. Logan was lucky to finish. I thought he was going to get stuck in the gravel trap. I was kind of hoping for a safety car there. But yeah, Albon knocked out early on. No points for him. That chassis is going to have to go be repaired once again. Then in 7th place with 4 points, nearly scored points today, did this team. Haas.
I actually think Magnussen probably had a better race than Hulk. I think Hulk started well, but then dropped back. Magnussen was the one who was having a bit of a battle around that sort of like 12th to 10th place.
Yeah, that sort of just bubbling underneath the points. Yeah. However, Haas were overtaken today by the next team, Obviously not by one of their drivers because he crashed out on the first lap. RB, 7 points, 6th in the Constructors' Championship. Yuki had some fantastic moves around Sector 1. It was nice to see actual overtakes, not just DRS stuff. No, Yuki drove great today, scored a point, home Grand Prix. Daniel ended up in a wall.
Again, I'm not blaming Daniel too much on this one. Yuki, good race, really good race. He's probably not doing too badly in the actual driver standings either. 7 points on his own. He scored the entirety of that team's points this season. Yeah, good weekend for Yuki. He'll be really happy with that. Back-to-back points for the Racing Bulls is brilliant. And it'll be interesting to see what they do in China. I'd love to see Daniel score points at some point this season, especially if Yuki does keep sort of putting that in the top 10. He just needs a good qualifying, doesn't he? He just needs to actually have a good qualifying.
We might see something in China because I don't think we've raced there since 2019, and Yuki hasn't raced there in an F1 car, I believe. 5th then in the Constructors with 33 points.
Aston Martin.
It is Aston Martin. Lovely stuff. They are 1 point off the next position, which is 4th place. 34 points for Mercedes.
I think they'll catch him. In the next race.
Had Stroll been in the point, had he had a better qualifying, they would have knocked Mercedes down into 5th, I reckon.
Yeah, I agree. Alonso's just having a consistent season. He's just having a consistent season.
P5? P6?
Yeah, which is, I think, was it not P5?
No, P6. Lando was P5.
Oh, yeah, the two Ferraris.
But Alonso's finishing very much at the middle of the points, and that's going to tally up to a lot. You know, that's what, 10 points? That's pretty good.
And Mercedes can't catch them on track, so they're not going to catch them in the constructors.
They need updates. They need upgrades. Does Mercedes to catch Aston?
It's a customer team. There's two customer teams ahead of them.
I was going to say McLaren 3rd with 69 points. Nice, more than double the points of Mercedes. As a consumer team, I find that very alarming for Mercedes at least, but a good weekend for them. Oscar had a good battle with George. Lando, shame that he lost out from 3rd. Didn't keep his podium streak going after his 3rd place last weekend in Australia. 2nd place, 120 points. Good race weekend for this team. Ferrari.
Yeah, and I think this is partly what's playing into my sort of jadedness is it looks like this season is not just going to be Red Bull domination. It almost looks like 3rd and 4th place are kind of swept up a little bit as well. I just feel like the Ferrari has a gap to McLaren in 3rd, and the expected order now is
getting
Max,
more predictable.
Checo, Carlos, Charles. I think the actual possible switch there is maybe Charles and Carlos will fight for 3rd place, but that's kind of dull if you've got a bit of a cemented top 4.
Yeah.
So that's possibly a little bit of where I was disappointed today. I was excited. I'm not a McLaren fan. I like McLaren. I like Lando. I like Oscar. But I would have much preferred Lando to take that 3rd place just because it would have been
closer to your predictions.
Yeah, it's entirely selfish. But just would have been nice to go, all right, we don't quite know who that second best team is. But I feel like at this point in the season, we know.
Yeah.
We know.
They are almost running away with 2nd at this point. So it's getting predictable, much like our first team. 1st place, 141 points, Red Bull. A flawless weekend, arguably. Nothing really went wrong for them at all. Great quali, great race. Max was on form as usual, bounced back. Yeah, and a solid drive from Checo despite going off at the same corner where I think Oscar had a little moment. Charles and Logan nearly went into the wall. So, no, I'd say it's a decent weekend for them.
Just one thing to actually touch on, the gap, and I know that Max didn't finish a race, but the gap between Red Bull and Ferrari is closer than Ferrari to McLaren in terms of points by
So it's
quite a bit.
21 points?
21 points Red Bull to Ferrari.
Yeah.
And it's almost... Ferrari are almost double McLaren's points.
If Ferrari were on the same level of Red Bull, we would have quite a spicy championship on our hands. It's just Red Bull are just too far ahead for this championship to sort of really set itself on fire and become a light. Maybe at the halfway mark of the season when all the upgrades and everything's starting to come into fruition, maybe the championship could spice up a little bit. But at the moment, I'd argue this is a pretty dry, dull championship that we are seeing so far.
Yeah, it's feeling very last season-y.
Okay, so with all the teams being accounted for, let's go on to our predictions. Let's go on to our predictions for what we said was going to happen for the 2024 Japanese Grand Prix. So, pole position for the race. We both said Max.
Right.
We got that one right. Well done. Well done, us. Well done.
Go us.
Podiums. Third place, you said
Lando.
Which I thought for a brief moment could have actually happened, but it didn't. I said Carlos Sainz, so I get a point. I get a lovely little Spanish El Pois.
It was my hopefulness.
So yeah, I got Sainz right with third. Checo, I got for second. You went the same.
I had Checo.
And surprisingly, we said Max first. So for the first time so far of our podcast series and across the line history, I've managed to guess the podium 100% correctly. It's not a massive hooray statement. It would have been way more cooler had I gone like Stroll to win, Gasly second, Sargent third. That would have been more impressive.
I said Lando out of optimism. This race has brought my negative side out, so I'm coming in pragmatic into the next round, and I'm just gonna say exactly what I think, and I'm not gonna do any silly answers. I'm gonna play it as safe as possible, and I'm gonna take my points all.
Yeah, we're getting serious now. Biggest winner for the weekend, I said McLaren. I don't really think I can give myself that. I don't think. If Lando came third and Oscar came fourth, I would have argued that point, but no.
Even if Oscar had maintained his position and not gotten caught by George.
No, I agree.
No, I don't get a point for that. I won't take a point for Lando either.
Yeah, Lando was your biggest winner.
Lando was my biggest winner, and I think, again, it needed a podium.
No, yeah, I agree. Nil point for us on the biggest winners. Biggest losers, I said Mercedes.
I said Daniel Ricciardo.
I'll give you the point. I don't think I can really get the point for that. The biggest loser was not Mercedes this weekend. I think last weekend, I think I would have gotten points for it. But no, this weekend, they were not the biggest losers. They were probably the most mid, which I'm sure all the Gen Z listeners will love hearing me say. News story of the weekend, Red Bull updates working wonders was my prediction. They did, but it wasn't really a news story. No headlines really were sort of spoken about with that.
I went with FIA safety-related controversy, and to their credit, that red flag came out very quickly this weekend.
They must have listened. They listened to our podcast, and they were like, you know what? We can show them we're going to be safe.
There was one point where in commentary they're like, oh, and there's a tractor coming out on track, and I was like,
No, I don't think we got points for the biggest story this weekend, so that was rubbish. DNFs, we both said 4, and once again, we were one off with 3. Yes, Daniel and Albon out on the first lap, and Zhou had a quiet retirement a couple of laps into the race. And safety car, again, we both said yes. There was no safety car, despite the fact that Logan went up on lap 42. I thought there was going to be one there, but he didn't get beached. He just reversed back onto the track.
Did they not even get one out just to lead them all back in on the red flag?
We can, however, award points to one of our new bonus questions that we started bringing in last episode. Fastest pit stop for Kick Sauber. Both of us were wrong with that. I said like a million months.
I said 22 seconds. And they got a solid 8 second pit stop. Good weekend for Kick Sauber.
Nowhere near correct on that. However, my new round, which was to guess 7th, I said Stroll, no bueno, no points for me. You, however, bang on the money.
Just a feeling. Just
George Russell, P7.
I feel like he's there a fair amount. Even last week, that's what he was racing for when he sort of... Oh, no, he was in P7. He was racing for P6, I think.
We can't have P7 become predictable. All right, first place with max dominance, I can get it. But P7 dominance, I think is going to get quite boring.
I think it makes sense, though, if you think about it. It's you've got the first four sort of blocked up. Then McLaren are kind of ahead of Mercedes and Aston Martin. So they're taking... Alonso's outperforming, so he's getting those fifth places. Lando's going to lock down fifth or sixth. And yeah, George just quietly sneaks in seventh place.
Yeah. Well, there we go. So those are our predictions. Pretty fair all round. I think what I lost in my guessing of seventh, I made back with Charles. I made up with Sainz coming third, and you made up points there. So a fairly even weekend with our predictions. So that is going to be the end of our Japanese Grand Prix race review. Hopefully you enjoyed listening to it. Zach, we're in China next week, or the week after next. Will it be a good race?
I don't know.
Just let's just say no. It's going to be boring. It's pointless waking up early for it.
Pessimism is setting in. The energy is gone.
This is our last podcast. Thank you very much for listening.
Yeah, the start of the season, I was so hopeful. I was thinking Red Bull are going to win it, but it's going to be better.
Nope. No. So hopefully it'll be a better weekend in China in 2 weeks' time. And
What time is it? What time's the race?
Well, we will be back with a podcast next weekend, and we're going to have to do another episode because it's a sprint race weekend, Zach. So we're going to get up nice and early to watch Max win not one race, but two. But there we go. Thank you very much for watching and or listening, everybody. This has been Across the Line, and hopefully we will see you guys in the next episode where we discuss our predictions for the Chinese Grand Prix. But until then, goodbye. Oh, smash the bell.